And joining us now here on the program, pleased to welcome into Market Talk for the first time. He is the lead animal protein economist for CoBank. Brian Ernest is with us. And Brian, great to have you on the show once again. Thanks for making the time to join us today. I hope you're doing well.
Doing well. Appreciate you having me on.
Well, I know you just published a new report, Brian, that piqued my interest. One, because I love chicken, but two, obviously, we watch the markets pretty closely here. And chicken wings, breast meat, sounds like there might be some reprieve on the way for consumers who are just really worried about inflation at the meat counter and more. So, just to start this new report on the CoBank Knowledge Exchange, walk us through, give us the headline rundown of what you found in the new report.
Yeah, I guess I do research for the bank, thinking about the different sectors that we look at, and my background is largely looking at the meat side of the business, and so I got to kind of thinking about like what should we expect this spring. Consumers have been hit with really strong inflation across the board. You look at energy markets and gasoline prices where they went the last year. Meat prices, kind of similar situation, not quite as drastic in terms of inflationary numbers, but still some strong price environment that they were faced with last year. And those prices that you see at retail at the grocery store, they're usually pretty quick to go up, but then sluggish to come back down, right? So it's tough to really say that, yeah, we'll see those prices come down. But what's leading my expectation around that, at least for chicken, is where the wholesale markets landed to end 2022. So I kind of looked at that market and I'm like, boy, we've got really cheap wings out there, a lot of cheap breast meat sitting on the market. What are they going to do? It's like, oh, and from a chicken perspective, it looks like they're pretty well situated to show some strong retail feature activity, at least this spring and summer.
Well, and I think as we get into the spring and summer months, grilling season, obviously, and we look at the comparison to say this beef market, which we know supplies are very tight. So one has to wonder if these low prices can hold here into the spring and summer, if there's increased demand for chicken, thinking wings, breast meat, etc., versus maybe certain beef cuts that aren't available or are, you know, higher in price at the meat counter. Brian, what's your thoughts there?
Yeah, we could see some shift between proteins, looking at different cuts certainly, or trading down from beef to chicken, something like that occur. I do think folks will probably start looking at their mix of eating out occasions versus cooking at home. A lot of folks learned how to fire up their grills in the pandemic, right? Or at least bought new grills and want to try new things, and use that. So then they realized, hey, I can cook good food at home, but I can also, do it a little bit cheaper than going out to eat. So, that's a learned behavior that probably shifting back that way a little bit more this year. And when I think about that eating out occasion, wings kind of comes more forefront than chicken breast. That's one of those items that eh, you know prior to 2020, it was on every menu, right? And then
Mhm.
2020, it was on even more menus. And then now we saw a high price environment for wings, and it people kind of pulled it off if they could, pulled it off the menu. So now it may be going back on, with wings going from, over $3 a pound from a wholesale perspective down to the dollar mark. It's a little bit more attractive to utilize in terms of putting it back on the menu or featuring it or something like that. So
Well, Brian, thinking away from the consumer and the retail side a little bit, thinking about our chicken producers. I know they had strong profitability in 2022. Looking at this year, if there's lower prices, obviously we're seeing higher feed costs as well. What's your thoughts for producers? What kind of environment are they looking at here as we have kicked off the new year?
yeah, it looks like it could be a windfall for consumers and the marketing channels, but Producers probably suffer a little bit in the current environment. You look at the wholesale markets, and they suggest that profitability really, really weak, if not in the negative currently, especially with the higher feed costs. Corn prices going up, and from where they were 3 years ago. Soybean meal, the same thing. That story situation continues to suggest that their input values are higher. Labor, same thing. There's challenges there that continue to add cost, and overall, that's challenging right now. I think when we get in the back half of the year, maybe or at least the middle of the year, things look a little bit better. But you're right. The really the good thing that kind of coming into this situation is a tailwind of strong profitability for the producers, that they're able to kind of weather through this storm that's occurring right now. Right? It's things don't look that great right now, but they did do pretty well last year, so that's helpful.
Well, before we run out of time, Brian, real quick, I know we've been focusing on chicken, but I'll just ask anything else you're watching throughout the entire protein sector, maybe anything you're working on, you could give us some thoughts that heads up on here that we need to keep in mind as we're working towards spring and summer.
Well, I'm looking across the board at the total mix altogether. And it does look like you mentioned from a red meat perspective, probably going to have tighter beef supplies this year than what we did last year. Just looking at cattle availability, production was a little bit stronger than anticipated in January, but that expectation is it'll be tighter moving forward. So in terms of the beef sector being able to really offset that inflationary environment doesn't look like that's going to be the case, right? So, I think that in particular is probably going to be a challenge to continue to get that excellent demand that beef has had here over the last couple of years. So, I think that's one to watch. And the other side is eggs. Eggs have been no shortage of talk of what's going on in the egg industry. It does look like, at least high path AI, the bird flu, they've been able to kind of stave that off here in the first couple months of the year. At least not as much of an impact as what occurred in 2022, but that doesn't mean we're necessarily out of the danger zone for that. So, still kind of keeping that on the radar, and I think overall that keeps support under egg prices here for much of 2023.
Well, I know folks can stay up to date with your research and more. CoBank.com under the Knowledge Exchange tab. You can find the chicken wings breast meat report under the animal protein sector there. Brian Ernest with CoBank, lead animal protein economist. Thanks for joining us here today on the show. We appreciate the time. We look forward to talking to you again soon.
All right, thank you.